Welcome to your Right to Know Hazard Communication Training. In 1983, the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard was established in order to protect employees who use hazardous materials on the job. Most of us who work in the school setting are not expected to work with hazardous chemicals. In fact, we are more likely to be exposed to hazardous chemicals at home when caring for our house, property, or through many of the hobbies we enjoy. Due to the fact any school employee may potentially come into contact with a hazardous material, federal and state regulations require training on how to protect yourself from the potential effects of exposure. Therefore, as public employees, all persons who work in New York State schools must attend annual Right to Know training. The law also requires that a Right to Know poster be located where employees can easily access information. This poster includes the name of the district contact should you have questions about your potential exposure to chemicals. This law also dictates that if information about a chemical is requested by an employee, the district needs to provide a written response within 72 hours, or the individual has the right to refuse to work with that chemical. This plan is available to you, the employee, at any time upon request. Most schools maintain their hazard communication plan in the health and safety files in the administrative offices. While the Right to Know law and the Hazard Communication Standard are not exactly the same, they share some basic requirements: training, inventory, labeling, and safety data sheets. The New York State Right to Know law requires that you receive training about exposure to chemicals when you are first hired, annually, and periodic training whenever your exposure to a chemical is changed. The federal OSHA Hazard Communication Standard requires similar training at the initial hire and periodic training when chemical exposures change or if employees demonstrate a lack of understanding of the procedures to follow when using hazardous products. Both regulations require that schools maintain a record of all hazardous chemicals used in the district. New York State law and the Commissioner of Education's regulations have reduced the number of hazardous chemicals in schools. It is impossible, however, to eliminate all chemicals from the school setting. Since 2004, green cleaning products have been mandated for all New York State public facilities. The intent of the green cleaning law is to reduce the exposure of children and school district staff to potentially harmful chemicals and substances used in the cleaning and maintenance of schools. Regardless of the care you use when handling chemicals, accidents may happen. So it is important to understand the routes of entry a chemical may take during exposure. There are 4 routes of entry: absorption into the skin, inhalation, injection, ingestion. Many chemicals can be absorbed into the skin or irritate the skin simply by contact. To prevent exposure, always remember to choose the right gloves for the job and to wash your hands afterwards with soap. Inhalation exposure involves airborne contaminants that can be directly inhaled into the lungs through the nose or the mouth. Generally, this is the most common route of entry for adults. An injection exposure occurs when a chemical enters your body by impact, a cut, or puncture to your skin. Injection can occur from syringe needles, broken glass, and other sharp objects. Wearing proper gloves and other protective equipment can reduce the possibility of exposure. Chemical ingestions are rare for adults but common for children. Children may accidentally or intentionally swallow products. In the case of an ingestion, it may or may not necessarily be appropriate to induce vomiting. Follow instructions carefully on the safety data sheet. As with all emergencies, there may be occasions when it is necessary to call 911 or the poison control hotline number. The key to minimizing potentially harmful effects from overexposure to chemicals is to avoid unnecessary exposure whenever possible. Exposure to chemicals can cause two kinds of hazards: physical and health. Physical hazards are chemicals acting outside the body to produce fire, combustion reactions, and/or explosions. Health hazards can be acute or chronic. Acute or short-term symptoms present themselves almost immediately. Chronic or long-term exposures do not present immediate symptoms, which makes illnesses such as cancer and respiratory disease more difficult to detect. The best way to determine if a product is hazardous is to read the label or to consult the safety data sheet. The label continues to be your first resource for information about a chemical. In order to make them even easier to understand, OSHA has adopted the United Nations globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. These changes are meant to enhance worker comprehension, especially for low literacy workers. According to the updated Hazard Communication Standard, all chemical products must use specific labeling elements and standardize the format for safety data sheets, formerly known as material safety data sheets. Any information found on the label should be the same on the safety data sheets. Signal words have always been used to indicate a product's relative hazard. The key signal words are warning or danger. No matter how many hazards a chemical may have, only one signal word will be used. It may also include a pictogram to give you a quick indication of what hazards might be associated with the product. These pictograms must be a square set at a point and include a black hazard symbol on a white background with a red frame. There are only 8 mandated pictograms that may be used and 1 non-mandated that warns of environmental hazards. The label also needs to include a specific product identifier. The manufacturer must use the appropriate product identifier and indicate such on both the label and Section 1 of the safety data sheet. The product identifier can be the chemical name, code number, or batch number. Precautions for storage and handling of products will be found in the precautionary statement. It may indicate that a special storage cabinet is needed or that the product needs to be stored away from sunlight or other chemicals. If any protective equipment is needed, those items will be described on the label. In schools, this PPE usually includes chemically resistant gloves and/or goggles. The label also provides emergency and first aid information in the event of a spill or exposure. When chemicals come into contact with the eye, it should be rinsed for at least 15 minutes, taking care to hold the lid open and not recontaminate the eye. The last labeling requirement is the hazard statement, which describes the nature of the hazard of a chemical. The hazard statements are specific to the hazard classification categories, and chemical users should always see the same statements for the same hazards, no matter what the chemical is or who produces the chemical. While labels are a good source of information, you might want to learn more about a chemical product by reading the safety data sheets, formerly known as material safety data sheets. Safety data sheets provide detailed information about a specific chemical, including health hazards, physical hazards, flammability, reactivity, storage guidelines, first aid, and safe handling procedures. These 16 sections include identification, hazard identification, composition information on ingredients, first aid measures, firefighting measures, accidental release measures, handling and storage, exposure controls, personal protection, physical and chemical properties, stability and reactivity, toxicological information, ecological information, disposal considerations, transport information, regulatory information, and other information, including date of preparation or last revision. Each school district that participates in the Safety Office program will be able to access and manage its safety data sheets online 24/7. This will facilitate maintaining a district chemical inventory, identifying products for disposal, and accessing sheets in the event of an unfortunate exposure. Please consult your supervisor or right-to-know contact to determine if your district uses traditional methods or the MDSD online program. Anyone who works with chemicals on a regular basis needs to be familiar with the potential hazards of the products and take care to minimize those hazards. Always choose the safest product that will do the desired task. And remember, only use products that have been purchased by the school district. Even scented products can cause reactions in persons with allergies or asthma. For more information about this program, please contact your supervisor or the contact listed on your district's Right to Know posters, or the Oneida Herkimer Madison BOCES Safety Office at 315-793-8693. Remember, you have a right to know and to understand.